Hello, thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to introduce Liz Bober, the Library Assessment Officer in the Calvin Smith Library at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. Today, she's going to be presenting strategic ways to leverage Scopus and SciVal to increase university rankings. My name is Charity Ellifritz. I am the customer consultant here at Elsevier. I cover the research intelligence portfolio. Just a few housekeeping comments before we get started. We suggest viewing the presentation in full screen just so you can see everything a little better. This session is being recorded for all attendees, and you will receive a link to the video. Please submit questions by using the chat feature on your screen. At the end of the presentation, we will choose some questions to answer. For the questions that we don't get to, we will try to email those to you, but please, when you put your question in the chat, make sure you include your name with your question so we know who to respond to. So I am going to pass it off to Liz now from Case Western. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Like Charity said, I'm Liz Bober. I'm from Case Western Reserve University. And today we are going to talk about international rankings. But first, let me give you a quick snapshot of Case Western Reserve University and kind of where I sit in the Calvin Smith Library. So we are located in Cleveland, Ohio, and we are considered a medium-sized, high-impact research university. We have over 5,000 undergraduate students, but what makes us unique is that we have a larger graduate professional population of over 6,000 students. Now, KSL primarily serves the undergraduate student populations, and that includes all of our College of Arts and Sciences, our management school, and our engineering school. Case Western offers 3 other libraries, and they help serve our law school, our medical, nursing, and dental schools, and our School of Social Work. KSL is the largest of the libraries, and we had in FY 2019 over 410,000 visitors that year alone, and we offer 2.4 million print items and over 800,000 electronic resources. My position was initially created to assess and measure the collection, as well as the services and the impact that the library makes to the university. However, it expanded to include international rankings, and over the past 4+ years or so, I have worked to make sure that the university libraries has a place with the university's international ranking initiative. Now, you may or may not know what international ranking agencies look at. So we wanted to give you a small idea of kind of what they do, especially when it is in regards to how the library can actually make an impact. And that includes Scopus data or citation data in general. So QS, World University Rankings, and THE, where we're going to really focus on the Times Higher Ed World University Rankings, both use Scopus data. And when looking at these parameters, you need to understand what data sets we actually extract prior to the data pulls of their data sets. So that's a lot of use of the word data, but you have to understand that the methodology that is being used is different from year to year. So I'm going to give you a few brief examples. QS parameters include a total number of citations received by all papers produced by an institution across a 5-year period by the number of faculty members at that institution. So that's a lot of data points that you have to be looking at. To account for the fact that different fields have different publishing cultures, papers concerning the life sciences are responsible for nearly half of all research citations. As of 2015, they normalized those citations. A 5-year publication window for papers, say for example 2020, looks at papers published from 2013 to 2017, and then in comparison looks at a 6-year citation window. So for 2020, you'll be looking at citations from 2013 to 2018. That year alone, QS assessed 74 million citations from 13.5 million papers once self-citations were excluded. So that is a lot of data that is looked at using Scopus data. Now, THE parameters for 2018, They reviewed the bibliometric data for 67.9 million citations to 14.1 million journal articles, article reviews, conference proceedings, books, and book chapters published over 5 years. So the data included more than 25,000 academic journals indexed by Scopus's database and all index publications between 2013 and 2017. Citations to these publications made in the 6 years from 2013 to 2018 are also collected. So there is a lot of methodology that goes into this. And what I'm going to show you is the process that we used to help make sense of exactly what they're looking at and actually create some results around that. So when this project was assigned to me, I had to determine how to create the process because it's never really been done before. No library has ever really looked at it that at least I could determine. So I had to figure out what was most efficient and effective to move this project forward. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about these steps of our process and how we use Scopus and SciVal to achieve international impact. First, let's start by using Scopus. I don't know how many people are comfortable or know Scopus that well, so I'm going to try and break this down to make it seem a little bit logical, at least I hope. So first, you're going to see here on this screen the displaying of the hierarchy, of the affiliation hierarchy. And so I'm going to use affiliation, I'm going to use variation to give you an idea of what we're looking at, because there's affiliations and then there's variations of those affiliations. So first, you need to determine how you want your institutional hierarchy to look and ask important questions based on that. Do you have professional schools, institutes, or affiliations with university hospitals that need to be accounted for and agreed on by stakeholders? So if you have those, like you can see on this screen that Case Western does, you need to know how to build that hierarchy. And it's important for a few different reasons. When you're creating a hierarchy, you're going to go into the Institutional Profile Wizard, or the IPW. And this will help determine how many institutional variations you will have as you start looking at the different affiliations that you have, okay? You will learn that you have more variations of your affiliations, and they exist more than you would ever think. So I started looking into determining how many affiliations we had by talking to the other libraries on campus. From there, I learned that the professional schools called their respective schools, so School of Medicine, our nursing schools, School of Social Work, they all called their schools something slightly different. So they used shorthand, they used abbreviations to the institutes or labs that they had. So we had to determine how many there really were. So I started with a list of about 200. And currently we have over 700 different affiliation variations for Case Western Reserve University. Now, we also went through a school merger in the 1960s, so that created more variations than I anticipated. And knowing what you know a little bit about what citations and papers are looked at, you may ask why I cared about stuff that happened in the 1960s or earlier. And it's because if you're going to clean something up this massive, then you really should care about what your entire institutional research portfolio looks like, because it's not just the International Ranking Initiative, it's the whole kit and caboodle, essentially, when it comes to an institution. You want to have that complete picture so that you know exactly what you're working with. Learning about the unknown items is a game changer. For example, we work with the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals of Cleveland. So we needed to make sure we were cross-listing with those organizations to give them credit for the papers that they are producing. So we want to make sure that the affiliations are aligned between the institutions. My first step going into the IPW was trying to determine which affiliations and versions that were in Scopus by quickly looking at individual publications and include them in our hierarchy. This takes time and a strong attention to detail. We're also able to learn of unknown issues. For example, you will catch incorrect spelling. So Case Western Reserve University, wrong addresses. You'd be surprised how many use their personal home addresses when they publish. So Case Western San Diego, because that publisher, that researcher is based out of San Diego, so they use San Diego as their address. So that creates a new variation. These new variations of the institution you would not have been aware of, and the IPW allows you to narrow that down and determine what school belongs to you, essentially, what affiliation variation. It helps clean this up, and it took me about 1.5 years before I could say I was in a place where I just needed to do quarterly cleanup. So 1.5 years, one person, 700 new affiliations, that's quite a bit. But really the complicated step was cleaning up faculty variations. Faculty affiliation is very complicated, and this is an extreme example of what you could potentially see. This is one faculty member, and he has hundreds of publications listed in Scopus. This faculty member is also associated with multiple institutions. So to clean this up, we pulled all of their publications and how they associated themselves with those papers. So we went through each individual listing. Was it Case Western, or was it one of the other institutions that they worked with during the summer or during winter break? We needed to make sure, and we went paper by paper to determine how they were actually affiliated at time of publication. We then submitted all of this information to Scopus to help clean up the issues that we were seeing. Now, over the summer, not this past summer, but the summer before, this faculty member was moved multiple times from school to school as they claimed the author. And it's true, he created publications for them. They felt that all those publications would belong to that institution. So we had to work with the faculty member to make sure they assign their Orcid ID to their Scopus profile. And that created a cleanup and stopped the multiple claimings that were occurring. Now, this took all summer to correct, and needless to say, it was a bit frustrating as we struggled to wrap our brains around the issue and figure out how to correct it. Now, this is just one faculty member. We have to clean up a few thousand current faculty members each year, and we also have to account for faculty that were left over in the past few years for that citation and publication window. So you need to make sure that between the last 5 and 6 years, your papers are correctly attributed to your institution. We also want to make sure that on the flip side of that, any new faculty members are not being incorrectly attributed to our institution until they're actually publishing under Case Western. So one of the newest releases of Scopus includes and allows us to review all the institutions that the faculty member has published under, which is very helpful to us now when we're looking for new and past faculty as we reassign publications or affiliations. Now that we've made significant improvements in Scopus, we are able to go to SciVal to better analyze the institution and the affiliations, as well as the faculty and departments. There's so many ways to create a university hierarchy. And we have been making multiple versions of departments and of the schools depending on the requests and needs of the institution. So each November, we receive a board-appointed faculty member list from our institutional research office. We then create a basic hierarchy that is set up by school and then drills into the departments. We will then make adjustments from there as requests come in from the department heads, librarians, and any other areas with special requests for projects or analysis. We completed a project last year for the College of Arts and Sciences so that they could review the rank of each faculty member and their scholarly output. I requested the most recent list of current faculty to achieve this and added those faculty that were not a part of the board appointed list that we already had. So I added in mainly adjuncts, non-tenured professors, lecturers, to make sure that we had everybody needed. I then broke it down by each individual rank that was listed. So using the import feature, we were able to clean up profiles during this process, and we're able to start tracking the faculty that were not found in Scopus at all. One thing I always need to make note is that during this type of project or any project, when you're adding in faculty or researchers, is that you need to create a list of those that you're not finding. So for example, if you're not finding a faculty member, it's maybe because they haven't published under your institution yet, or they haven't published at all, or that journal that they published in is not indexed by Scopus. So there's a lot of different reasons why you wouldn't be able to find a faculty member. So it's going to impact the analysis. So when you're looking at this screen, you're able to see that we were able to match 22 different authors, but there are 4 that may not be part of Case Western. Okay. Now, one of the newest updates for importing researchers includes the ability to save and go back into the module, which for me, this was one of the most exciting updates that I had seen in a very long time. And that was really because if you're looking at a very large list and you're trying to determine what to do, or if you make an error, or if you need to switch your priorities and you're in the middle of something, you are now able to save it and then able to go back to it later and continue your import researcher function, which for me was really exciting because I wound up losing a lot of work prior to that. So now you've worked on the back end. We've completed all that work and we were able to move forward. We were now able to focus on our present and our future. The library partnered with research administration to talk directly to the research deans of the university. And we offered formal training sessions that would focus on how to use Scopus and SciVal, as well as promoting Orcid IDs. We have completed multiple one-on-one sessions, as well as targeting schools and departments as whole. To get the buy-in from the faculty, the library offers consultation, and we will sit with the faculty member to set up their Orcid accounts and review their different profiles on Scopus and similar services. We work across schools and with other libraries on campus so that we make the most impact and encourage the most participation. I'd like to say that we have 100% faculty Orcid IDs, but really we're only at about 30% of fleshed out Orcid profiles. And what I mean by that is that you want a faculty member to have a profile like this and not like this. The reason why you want a fleshed out profile is because that employment will trigger Scopus to know that anything that's being generated is attributed to your institution directly. Having education and qualifications and et cetera just kind of adds to that and creates something that people can look at and say, okay, this person is, their keywords are exactly where I need to be, and I want to look at their profile. This is ongoing and really has a tendency to be more grassroots, and really we talk from one person to the next, and then we're able to get buy-in that way as they tell their friends and their friends tell their friends. So really it's marketing, it's communication, it's really making sure that people understand the importance of this and how nice it is for a faculty member to take this with them wherever they go and have a complete profile. Now the actual results, what you really want to know, did this actually work? So when looking at the cleanup, starting in 2017, we really didn't see major improvements until 2019. Due to the work and effort necessary, it may take a cycle or two to really get a feel for it. However, you can see with QS, over the past 4 years, we've been able to move up 51 spots in the international rank. And then with THE, we've successfully moved up 37 spots as the 2021 release. Now you'll see that the line dipped slightly in this past year, and there's a few different reasons for that for THE. Methodology and the amount of institutions that are in the list. So that will change from year to year as well. So when you're looking at this, you need to look at it as a picture that the entire institution needs to be reviewing. So it's not just citations, so that's what I focus on. You'll see that the score is a 95 this year. The year before was a 95.3. Now, each score goes up to 100. So I really don't have a ton of space to move because I've completed all of the cleanup. All I can really do is start focusing more and more on communication and education to our faculty members and why it's important to have their Orcid profiles, their Scopus profiles clean and accurate. But I'd like to say that it's just citations that we need to be concerned about, but really when it comes down to it is that we're looking at every single score. So when you look at this spreadsheet, you'll see that the past 2 years, we had the exact same score. However, there were additional schools added to the THE list, and depending on what that average score looks like, we'll make slight adjustments. It's important to show not only the improvement, but the decreases as well, to learn about where we're going and where we need to be. So looking at ARWU in Shanghai, NTU, Leiden, US News, now they all use a different service. They all use Claravate Data. However, these are the ones that we look at and then compare our methodologies and be able to really work through all of these ranks to determine where we're going and what we need to do. With QS and THE, we've been able to make the necessary changes to improve the citation area in the methodology and be able to use that information. So looking at our progress, we're very excited where we're going and what we're doing, and we're hoping to keep this momentum moving forward and break into the top 100. So thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So please feel free to put any of your questions in the chat function. We haven't had any so far. You guys are a quiet group.
Or I blew all their minds and they have no questions because they're like, there's way too much information for an hour.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Rebecca said that they are just starting their journey with Scopus and the H index at their institution. Hey, Rebecca, would you mind telling us what institution you're with? Des Moines University. Okay, thank you. So Sue says, does it make sense to approach cleanup in Scopus first before looking at SciVal, or can they be done at the same time?
That is a great question. So one thing, I'm definitely further, I started with just Scopus. I started with the affiliation to clean that up because that rolls down into the faculty members to roll. It's kind of weird. You start big and then you get smaller and smaller and smaller, and that in turn cleans up your faculty member profile. However, once I started doing my quarterly cleanup and my yearly feed of board-appointed faculty members, I was in SciVal. I use SciVal for most of that cleanup because you're able to clean up the faculty members through that import feature. So if you're starting at the very beginning and you've never touched it before, my suggestion is that you clean up your affiliations first and then you can go into SciVal and start cleaning up your faculty members that way.
So William has asked, do you have any sense of whether Scopus or Web of Science requires more data cleaning in terms of institution names, faculty names, etc.?
So that is also a good question. So with Scopus, third parties myself, where if you're on an administrator level, you're considered kind of a third party. You're not the actual faculty member. You are, you have more ability to complete cleanup without having to submit tickets for the most part. You're able to do a lot. It's a more flexible platform, I would say. With Web of Science, there's more tickets that you need to submit and requests, though they are changing that because they do have a faculty or an author search feature now. A lot of the cleanup comes from the publisher level. A lot of the cleanup comes from the way that the data sets are put into Web of Science and Scopus. I can't honestly answer like what an actual number I would consider. I just found it always easier to work in Scopus versus Web of Science because of the flexibility. Web of Science, they have their reasons why they kind of keep it locked down versus Scopus allowing that more flexibility. So I don't necessarily know I answered your question. One's easier to use than the other. That's
well, Sue,
really the thing I could say.
Sue helped you out, and she said that she found Web of Science cleanup very hard and slow. So that's what Sue said.
I was trying to be really diplomatic in my answer, and I couldn't get there. It was hard. It's hard. It's a clunky system, and they are getting better. So I always go back and I always work with them and test with them and kind of see what they're doing. I never just say don't use Web of Science, because we do need Web of Science when it comes to international rank. So
Willa says that they're actually starting a project to try to do this very same thing with area study librarians, and that this helps in terms of methodology. So a little feedback for you. Okay. Helen and Joseph kind of asked the same question. So Helen's question was, what permissions are needed to update institutional information in Scopus? And Joseph asked, if you clean up an affiliation in Scopus, is that revising the underlying Scopus entry also? And I can answer that for you. So we have something within Scopus called the Institutional Profile Wizard. Obviously, what Liz showed you, you can see how making changes can impact your rankings. And therefore, we don't just leave that open to everyone. So, you know, when someone's cleaning up their author profile, we allow you to just go through like a wizard type tool, and you answer some questions, and anybody has access to that. But when it comes to the institution, because it does have such an impact, we only allow up to 3 people per institution to have access to that tool. Then what you do is you go through a little training. I know that in my territory, I've actually created a little guide for it to help you walk through it. Liz actually showed you some screenshots as well. But yes, that does affect the underlying Scopus data. We at Elsevier believe that no one knows your research better than you. And so that's why we give you all these feedback loops to make changes like that. If you are interested in looking into IPW, typically what it is, it's usually a person out of the research office. It's usually a person out of the library, and then someone that's basically a liaison. I find that that's typically how it works here in the States for people that get access to IPW. But you have my email address right now on the screen. If you are interested in that, if you will shoot me an email, I can get you started in getting access to that. But just remember, we only allow up to 3 users for that per institution. The next question, Danica says, you mentioned that other rankings use Claravate data. Have you worked at all with them to do similar cleanups?
Yes, I have. Going through Claravate data is, I don't want to say it's similar to Scopus. However, I use the same approach. I've looked at the affiliations. For them, it's called Organization Enhanced. You look at that list. You start sending them the list of new names. And then I look at individual researchers as well to kind of get a feel of what's going on there. They now have an author cleanup section similar to Scopus. that you are allowed to make some changes to it, combining profiles, because I found that with Web of Science, everything kind of gets split out really badly, and then you're able to kind of bring it together now. So yes, I've done the same process.
So George just made a comment here. He says the problem with institutional affiliation cleanup is faculty don't sufficiently assert the more specific, like for example, department affiliation, and instead assert top level university affiliation only. So cleanup can better expose a given department, but it may not be exhaustive. George, you're absolutely right. So one thing that when I'm teaching people about IPW and what they're looking at, I always tell people, do not think of it like brick and mortars. Don't think of it in terms of departments. You have to think about it in terms of how do people publish. So for example, if your chemistry department does not publish at like Case Western Reserve University, Department of Chemistry, you're never going to be able to pull that kind of information out of Scopus. So I know in Liz's situation, they actually went in and talked to faculty and made it much more clear about the expectations about how people should self-identify. That was a big deal. Liz, you might want to talk about that a little bit.
Right. So a few things that we did, and it was different from department to department and school by school. So our engineering school has kind of been a champion for us on what they've been doing. They write certain verbiage into the contracts of how when you publish, you will be publishing as Case Western Reserve University, and then have your department second. So it just won't be the Department of Chemical Engineering. It will be Case Western Reserve University, Department of Chemical Engineering. So our schools are requiring that. One big thing is that we are closely tied with Cleveland Clinic, and they publish as Cleveland Clinic Foundation. However, we have the Learner College of Cleveland Clinic at Case Western Reserve University, which is even worse of a mouthful. But we have worked with them to ensure that anyone who's associated with the Learner College, they are publishing as the Learner College of Cleveland Clinic at Case Western Reserve University, and that is also written into their contract. So we've been working very closely with Cleveland Clinic to ensure that not only are we getting credit, they are getting credit as well. So when you look at a hierarchy, you'll see Case Western, but below that, you'll start seeing, I call them child affiliations, and the parent affiliation is Case, and then below that are all the different ones that you're going to find. And in one of the screenshots that I showed earlier in the presentation, you're able to see just kind of a small snapshot of what that looks like. And I can go back to that. Let me go back into that.
While you're moving to that, I'm going to answer a question that came up. Someone had asked, is there a way to display or find out the people who have been assigned the institutional manager tool so faculty can contact them easier? I unfortunately have not found a good way to do this. Basically, I have not had a situation yet where an institution has too many people that have access to IPW. So if you think that you are the proper person to have access to, or you want to go to your research office, just send me an email and we'll go through the access process.
Mm-hmm. So what you can see here is just kind of the level of affiliation hierarchy that you're going to see. And so one of your first steps will be determining what's considered your top one, and you're able to see the different documents of how they're being how your researchers are publishing as you. So as Case Western, we want to make sure that that's kind of the top. We know a lot of publications come out of our med schools, so we want to make sure that those are also looked at. So you're able to kind of see, and this isn't really in any particular order. I haven't gotten to the point where I need it to be in a very specific order, since it's just me really looking at it. All I know is that these are very important, and making sure what's tied to each other is accurate, essentially. So this is just a snapshot that you'll be able to find if you click on your institution. when you're in Scopus, but when you actually go into the IPW, you'll see list upon list of it. So the screen here it looks weird, but these are actual versions of the school that is being listed. So this is another alternate name list. And that's when I said, when you're looking at it, you're going to find these very bizarre spellings of your institution. And if you've gone through any change of your name, you're going to find that information here.
Okay, Jane asked, can you speak more about the Orcid ID assignment to a Scopus profile? Specifically, is it actively used for attribution or just a searchable self-appointed field? Do you want to answer that?
So there's a couple different things that you can do to turn it into sort of a loop. So if you've published twice with a journal or a set of journals that have been indexed by Scopus, you'll be assigned a Scopus ID. That Scopus ID you can tie to an Orcid profile or vice versa. So you as the user are able to make the link between the two. You can do it either on the Orcid side or you can do it on the Scopus side to do that. And it's a simple wizard that if you're in your faculty or I would say researcher profile in Scopus, on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see where you can connect your Orcid profile. And then when you're in Orcid, if you scroll all the way down, you're able to connect to Scopus and then create an infinite loop of connecting the two systems together. Does that answer your question?
I don't see any other questions coming through.
Okay.
We did great this time, getting to all of them.
I also talked faster this time, I feel like. So I also have a poster that is being presented here that goes through the steps as well. There's also a 5-minute video associated with that you can look at if you have more questions or want to refer back to something. That way you kind of have this, which is more of the nuts and bolts, or you can see the overview. So we kind of did a lot.
Jane came back and she was asking, she said that she was more concerned about if it's used by Scopus as a means of identifying works Elsevier assigns to avoid multiple author profiles. That is yes. Mm-hmm. So Jane, if you have articles in your Orcid profile that are, let's say they're in a local newspaper or it's in something that's not indexed in Scopus, it's not going to bring that article into Scopus. That's not what the purpose is. The purpose is that just like what you said, like, let's say that it's a, the most common thing is like, let's say it's a woman that got married and changed her last name. So in that situation, you have the same Orcid ID, so it makes it so that in Scopus you don't have two individual author profiles. It brings the two author profiles together because it says, hey, you have informed us that you are in fact the same person. So that's the feedback loop that the Orcid ID does. Does that sound right, Liz? Is that good?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Liz or myself. And like I said, we're going to, this was recorded and we will try to send you the recording link. I know the conference is working on that piece. So have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.